Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Slater Pod. Today on the podcast, we welcome Luke Innes. So, Luke's the CEO of global transcreation agency Creative Translation. Hi, Luke, and thanks so much for joining today.
Hi, Florian. Thank you. I'm a keen follower of Slater and all you do. It's an honor to be here.
Awesome. Glad to have you on the podcast. So, where are you recording this from today? What country, what city?
Well, this is London, almost. I mean, it's leafy Chiswick, in all fairness. But this is our HQ in the UK.
Still within the M25 or outside?
Yeah. We're just in the leafy countryside part of London. You know, it's still technically London.
You need the leafy part to be inspired for
Absolutely.
transcreation.
Yeah,
there you go.
totally.
All right, before we get started with this, or to get started rather, tell us a bit more about your background, your route into the language industry, into the creative industry. How did this all come together?
I had no intention of going into the language industry when I started out. I was at art college, and I was kind of exploring different routes there. Bit of music, bit of photography, all kinds of things. So I was on that sort of path. But I set up my own design agency, um, and it was a small agency, but we grew. It was all right. But I happened to be next to a translation agency, so just by coincidence, I was back to back with them. And as it happened, as you do, you have a coffee and you're talking about things, and they said, "Well, could you do some typesetting for us? Because we've got some Russian, we've got some, Hebrew, we've got these different languages. We need to put them into Quark Express." So I was like, "Yeah, sure, I can do that." And I started doing that, and there were technical difficulties back then with Quark Express and Macs and PCs and that kind of thing. But there were some technical challenges to get around. But once you got through those, I was typesetting it, and in as you do, you read what you're putting the language into, and I sort of noticed that in one of the magazines I was doing, there was some sort of colorful language. I think it was 70s caravan chic, if I remember correctly, to define something, and this was in Russian. And so when I handed it back, all beautifully laid out in Russian, I said to the project manager, "Look, this is quite interesting. There were a few puns, a few jokes. How do you translate into Russian 70s caravan chic? And what does that even mean to a Russian audience? What's that?" And they were like, "Where was that text?" And then here in the caption right there. Yeah, no, we just translated it. And I was at that moment, I was kind of perplexed with wow. So that's quite a literal situation there. And what would that mean? So it kind of set the balls rolling or the cogs rolling in my mind to think about how would you even do that. And so fast forward a few more years, and the owner of the translation agency wanted to retire, so I took my opportunity because I could see there was a real need for something more meaningful. So I yeah, that was the beginnings. And when I took over the company, I focused it entirely on the creative process, how to solve that problem of translating. I keep going on about 70s caravan chic, but it was quite. It encapsulates a lot of the challenges that are involved in transcreation or adaptation. So that's what I did. I chose to do that, and then that went well. I think it was the right choice. Back in the day, there weren't many doing what I was trying to do. I can't say I coined the term transcreation, but I certainly invented my own way of achieving it. And I think it was a huge difference in terms of what approach then. And we still apply some of these principles today. Of course, we now incorporate the tools that have come to the fore now, including AI, because it can be exceptionally useful for research and things like that, and even to some extent with the creative process. But offering value, and really our raison d'être has been meaning, to make sense in any language, if you like.
It's the toughest part, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't even know how to translate 70s caravan chic into German right off the bat. So I need a bit of context to that and understanding of what it's attempting to achieve in German, right? So that was about what, a couple of decades ago, and was the company called Creative Translation, or you rebranded it,
I
or
rebranded it. I
you
rebranded
rebranded it?
it. Yeah.
Okay.
Initially, it was my, you know, when I realized, and I was still helping them out, I said, you should have a creative department. You know, you should just be doing. And so, creative translation was a sub department then. But when I took it over, it was the name. We just dumped everything else because, you know, I think it wasn't, you know, it didn't feel relevant. You know, boring translation, literal translation. You know, they're not very catchy names.
Nope.
And so, you know, actually, no, it felt right. But that, you know, that said, at the time, people were saying, "What's creative translation?" Because, like, aren't you just making stuff up? You know, that was the thinking, and I was like, "Well, good point." You know, but no, we're not. We're doing it creatively. And for me personally, as a creative, you know, it was very important for me to understand that language was a creative process. That was the door opening for me, if you like, because, you know, when you look at it that way, it becomes exciting and challenging and rewarding. You know, whereas I think in the creative industry, even to this day, even though the importance of translation and adapting to languages well, meaningfully, you know, is widely recognised, the subject is still tarnished with the idea of it being a bit boring. You know, and you know, because it's language, it's the bit that isn't exciting. You know, coming up with the creative is the exciting bit, and absolutely it is. But how you adapt it is full of, it's rich with challenges, and I think that's what's you know, as an agency in this industry, we're very connected to the creative element, and that, you know, that's my whole reason for doing this. You know,
Talk a bit about the structure of the company. So, like, kind of geography. You mentioned that you're in London HQ, but like, do you have other satellite offices? Like, what are some of the key clients, client segments, services? I'm sure you have kind of you
yeah.
know, adjacent services around the core language services.
We are global. I mean, we're HQ'd in the UK. We don't really have satellite offices as such. We have staff globally. I mean, we find that since COVID, you know, working from home is a model that many have adapted. For us, it seemed to be a seamless transition. You know, and it's opened the doors for us to increase our headcount, but in strategic locations around the world. So we have teams in the APAC, AMS, and EMEA at the moment. And we're always expanding according to need or strategic direction, you know, in terms of, you know, how what our footprint is. But, you know, to sort of put creative translation into a nutshell, you know, the elevator pitch really is that if you're a brand with a voice and a target audience that wants global growth, or if you're an agency that services those brands, we are your ideal language partner. You know, I mean, that's in essence what we're aiming at. But in terms of nuts and bolts, we're a full service agency, transcreation, translation, of course, cultural insight, copy origination, and proofing, brand guardianship at scale. And doing it at scale is different to being a little boutique. You know,
Very
it's
much.
a very different craft. But we also offer production services, and that's what people don't know us for. We offer production services for complex scripts like, you know, Hebrew or Arabic or Indic languages. And of course, across the suite of services we do, you know, we're leveraging AI where it's meaningful and beneficial to do so.
I want to talk about AI definitely in a bit. First, like, what's the typical kind of team structure on the linguistic side? Like, is it mostly kind of expert transcreator linguists? Is it copywriters, like monolingual copywriters, a mix of both? How does it look?
All of the above. I mean, our approach, you know, our translation or sorry, our talent pool, you know, if you like, um, our community of linguists is broad, and we have art directors, we have cultural consultants, we have copywriters who are monolingual, we have, you know, a whole range. And then we have obviously creative translators. Um, we have specialists in every subject. So it's a very mixed bag because for us, the challenges are always unique. And so the kind of talent that you need to meet the results and meet the goals varies widely.
Would you agree that kind of that notion that something like transcreation and caring about the brand, et cetera, is something that mostly is done by big enterprises, or are you seeing more kind of SMEs investing in something like this if they plan to go, you know, outside of their home country?
I think traditionally it has been the larger enterprises, but I think that so many things cause change, and obviously AI is causing a lot of change in the creative industry. But I think that there's also a sort of an understanding, because the platforms, the mediums through which we communicate the creative ideas are inherently more trackable, traceable. So, full funnel marketing strategies where you're making brand awareness, and then you're directing and creating a need, and then bringing down to a call to action that ultimately, you know, that process, in terms of language, is equally, relevant, because we're making all of those, we're translating all of these pieces, and generating copy for these pieces, as we go. So that's not a direct answer to your question, but I think the value is increasing because we can bring economies in through use of AI. But by looking at the performance side, we can also add value. So that combination is bringing the cost down and the value up. And I think that makes
Yeah.
it more accessible. And I think actually it also makes it more exciting, because that means that there'll be more unique campaigns, more flavor, more niche, better targeting. So I think there's a lot of great stuff to get your teeth into and we're seeing it already. We're seeing these agencies that are splitting away from the larger holding company structures and starting up very optimized. So I think it's interesting times.
You're right. I think the bar has been raised a lot over the past 5 to 10 years in terms of what people expect from an even small-ish company, right? In terms of like how they project the brand in many markets. Maybe in 10, 20 years ago, yeah, you wouldn't have expected something very kind of sophisticated, but now you do. So let's play kind of a hypothetical here, maybe almost kind of a bit of a case study. Like, let's assume, I'm running like a fast growing e-commerce, or I don't know, fintech company, and maybe I'm in the UK and I'd like to scale it to continental Europe and maybe certain kind of, high income countries or something in Asia. Like, how can you help? How would you, from like taking a brief, like to the next level of execution, and then running it kind of on a continuous basis?
It's a great question, but it's like, how do you squeeze a whale into an egg with that one? Because there's the hypothetical.
That's a good one.
There's the hypothetical answer where he's like, everyone's talking about the project before it started, and then you're moving into, the preparation and everything else. In an ideal scenario, there's a way it plays out. But the reality is often very different, and we can be invited at any stage in a campaign's life cycle. And whenever we do come in, wherever we come in, we'll add value. But the ways in which we can add value is, at the ideation stage, we can sense check the ideas, we can provide market insight to the creative teams who are developing the ideas. Then we also, obviously we support with the transcreation and the copy generation, all of that stuff, and translation. And then, we also support in other ways, which are more operational, like automation, integrating technologies, AI workflow design, this kind of stuff. So wherever we come in as an entry point is where we start, and we get on, roll our sleeves up and get what we need to achieve done. Then we look into what are the overall challenges, what are the ambitions, and we can then strategically advise and support. Our sort of, we see ourselves as a language partner. So, yes, you can come and use us for one job and never talk to us again, but more often than not, we will be there talking about afterwards what happened, how did it go? Because performance is one side that we really do focus on. It's two sides of the coin. You can walk into a room and say, oh, transcreation and cultural insight is really important, great, and here's a brilliant adaptation, right? And say it will be better. But if you have the metrics that show that there was an uplift and it was an effective campaign, then you've got the other side of the coin, which is to say, well, it does work and we can prove it.
Now, we did some digging on your website and saw that you're working with some of the very big companies, some of the biggest companies, right? Like Samsung, Airbnb, PayPal. I think you mentioned, like, if you're a brand with that much of a core brand identity, like how does one balance maintaining that and also making, cultural adaptations for the local markets? And I think these three brands that I mentioned did a phenomenal job, right? They're well known across many, many markets. So how does one do that generally? It's very tough.
Well, you know what? I mean, it's research and creativity, but it's 70s caravan chic, right? I mean, what's the point of saying that? What does that bring into the mind? And then what's the intent of bringing that into the mind? And then who are you bringing that to? And all of those questions. So, when we're taking on a brand that has a clear voice and a target audience, a way of speaking, there are other really interesting brands like Lush we worked with for a number of years, and they were great because they're quite political in their language. We also worked with Oatly as well, who've got a pretty strong kind of flavor in terms of their language. So, there's a lot of different kinds of ways of addressing audiences and approaches. So to understand that, you've got to research the intent. You've got to research the market. You've got to understand the intent, and then you've got to apply those insights to your creative process. And whatever technology you may use to help, ultimately, it's a creative workflow, and it involves, good old-fashioned sort of inspiration and working at it. You will go through iterations and you will find challenges, and that's with the key messaging. But obviously, that's the sort of really sharp end of the wedge in terms of the challenges with specific languages, big slogans or call to actions, or the taglines that really are supposed to engage. But more generally, what we're great at is providing the creative framework to give the linguists or the copywriters the right amount of freedom to actually create the message, or the longer copy on brand, echoing the same themes, carrying the same intent through all of the copy. So, we build that. So that's like building some sort of structure before you even start translating, references and points and markers that need to be achieved, in this. And good briefing is what it all comes down to, really, I think. And that's that. I could say that right to the beginning of when I started doing creative translation. It's really making sure you're putting yourself in the seat of the target audience, but you're also putting yourself in the seat of the writer, the person who actually has to achieve those results for you. And to get them enthusiastic about it. So you provide them with the insights, and you also give them support and the feedback they need to be able to continue, achieving that for you.
We're now 3 years into machines being able to produce copy to write, creative or otherwise. So maybe I want to start the AI discussion with kind of a more corporate question. Like, have your contacts changed over the past 3 years at companies? Have like the I don't know, within the marketing department, has the language component shifted to maybe like an AI department or something, or have things on the client side been relatively stable so far?
Everyone's looking at AI, right? Everyone's thinking it's the same. Look, if you rewind to when Google first offered free translation, the confusion that caused in the marketplace, why would I pay you guys to do it when I can get it for free, right? And what they can get for free was certainly something, but it wasn't necessarily usable in the sense that it could help you understand, but it wouldn't give you a piece of copy, by translating it. So with AI, I think there's also, and I think this is, people are waking up from the party a little bit in terms of, oh, hang on a minute, it's good for some things and it's not great for other things. And I said, in our experience, and we've been using it in anger to try and understand what it can do reliably and what it can't do, because it can be lucky in terms of creating something that goes, wow, that was great. But don't depend on that, because the next one may not be. And I think that, there's an understanding that it's not the amazing thing that can just do everything. There's an understanding that human intelligence is a part of the process. And that term, human in the loop, I actually like yours, expert in the loop.
I want to try to push that and coin that, because the human, I keep saying, it's just not enough. Just being a human in many areas, right?
Yes. Well, we coined our own, which, it's still under review, but we're going with it for now, which is human at the heart. And human at the heart of the process is the invisible part of that line. But, the thing is, the technology augments, right? So if you're the best person to be in control of the technology that's generating language is the expert linguist, because they can make the key choices at speed, going, no, this is right, this is wrong, this is right, this is wrong, and go through and actually enhance their productivity and almost automate the boring bits of their job and focus on the interesting bits, And I think that's really key. But anyway, in terms of clients coming to us and saying we want AI translation, they don't do that, but they do expect the savings, and quite rightly, So that's where we are focusing our efforts with AIs, is the repeatable, dependable things that you can get from it, and the automation of tasks that are, nobody really wants to do. And if we can reduce the time needed on doing those, when I say no one wants to do, they're the administrative tasks. They're like, managing translation memories, ensuring the alignment's good, creating translation memories before you even launch on a project. If it's a new agency or brand that you're working with, from large data sets, pulling all of that stuff together, making sense of that, it accelerates processes like that to no end. So there are savings, real savings to be made. Perhaps not in the place where you expect, like the creative copy. They're not going to suddenly, transcreation or copy origination is not going to drop massively. Where it's really critical, because that's craft, that's a thing that is important. You'd spend a lot of money doing the English. So it's not to spend a lot of money doing the language, but at least give it the time needed to get it really right. The operational stuff, the other stuff filters down, and you can automate according to criticality, critical it is.
Generally, what you said with you spend a lot of money on the English, that's something that continues to astonish me after even 20 years in this industry. Like, okay, you spend so much time and energy on the source. Like, come on, spend a little bit of time, especially on the target, especially in your field where it's like, it just has to be good. Otherwise, you may as well just not do it.
Yes.
Like, you're harming yourself I mean, I've read through, 20 years of just bad, like not Chinglish, like Denglish, like German English copy online. Like, I'm reading it, I'm like, it's German, yes, but like in my day-to-day, I speak mostly English. I see the English kind of shining through the German, like, at me. It's like too many verbs, it's just too casual, like, just doesn't make sense. Anyway, so that's where you guys come in. And despite AI, I don't think that last bit is solved yet, and I think it'll take a long time.
I completely, agree. I think there's a common sort of misconception that after the creative agency's created something and they've written this amazing copy and it's going to work so well in the local market of where it's originated, right? And it's going to be so great. All the hard work is done, because all you've got to do then is like translate it. Okay. Just translate that stuff and it's all going to be. So that's an understandable misconception, because actually that process of adapting and making it work in those markets is a deeper subject than just the last thing to do before clocking off on Friday afternoon. It's a big thing.
I mean, you mentioned Quark Express at the very start of this podcast. So image and kind of your prior life. So do you see parallels, like image generation using AI with text generation using AI? Because like it's getting a lot better also. The image generation part, ChatGPT just launched it. Now, I may very occasionally use something that is generated by AI, but like, again, it's not quite there yet. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, look, copy origination being supported by AI is a no-brainer, because, especially when you're talking at the top of the funnel, right? Because you may be bringing talking around subjects that are sort of creating a need or something, but they're not directly related to the brand. They're really more awareness of a challenge or a situation, maybe touching on something, but it's not brand language as such, right? So you can have a lot of fun creating that copy. And really all you're doing is making a big fishing net really out there. You're generating copy that's going to ultimately, hopefully lead them into your offer, right?
Yeah.
And so you can use AI to generate a lot of that copy. I mean, personally, if you look at an AI generated image, I think when they first came out, people were like, wow, what's that? And then but you look at it now and you can see a generated image against a real photograph. I mean, perhaps some people spend a lot of time making it look like a real photograph, but there's that invisible labor involved in fine tuning the AI to create something that looks real or sounds real. It's the same with copy. So, generated copy, it can be really badly generated. And I think heavily automated processes will fall victim to a reverse sort of, it's almost negative branding, because no one's going to connect to it. If you can put a human at the heart of the process, you are then in control of how that all those automated pieces are coming together and what direction they're going in. But you can't just leave these machines, I say machines, but this technology to just run it by itself, because it will just spew out mediocre at best, and it's not going to engage. And I think that's the key right now, is that with all of this messaging, and there's going to be a huge uplift in messaging, just so much more is going to be generated, because you can. Some of it will be generated well, some of it will be generated poorly. The people that are going to be winning in this equation are those who engage their audiences. And so it's critical that the expert in the loop, the human in the loop, is there making it make sense in any language. It's kind of, it's just another shift of technology. And translation industry has always been an early adopter. And I think that it's us guys that are the ones who are going to steer this well.
I guess here we were the earliest of adopters at scale. I mean, I wouldn't know any other industry that's worked with AI for that long to that level of depth. I mean, look at what's happening with all the coders, right? That are now having these tools and like, oh my God, I don't need to write like basic HTML code ever again. I can just click on a button and get it done. So let's talk about the expert in the loop, human at the heart, and how you get them to the level you need them to be. So you launched the Creative Academy to equip people in your network for that new AI world. Tell us more about that.
The idea has been brewing for a long time. I've always found it a point of frustration when we're looking for new talent and we've got people, knocking on the door all the time, and then coming to us saying, like, can I do some work? I'm really interested and excited I'm just out of university. I want to work in the creative industry. And, have you got any experience? Well, not really. And then it's like, okay, well, that's going to be a difficult thing. And they go knocking on the doors of all the agencies. They can't get a foothold in. They may get an opportunity, but it's a long road trying to get anyone to believe you could be trusted with some work. So we started a mentorship program with those who seemed to be very keen. We would give them test pieces. They don't, not as a live project or anything, right? But we just give them test pieces. If they don't show well, we would then sort of bring them into the workflow as, to help with proofing or to help with something long critical. And then we'd bring it in to, if they, but it's a slow process, and it was just my way of solving that problem. But I always had this idea of art school for linguists, right? Because when they come out of university, they will not really have been trained in how to interrogate a creative brief. Have you been given enough information? Do you have the confidence to actually say, no, I need this. What's the point of that? Ask those questions, and I think that that's an important tool set for any linguist who's embarking on a career in the creative industry. So it's what we kind of do. And a Creative Academy has always been something that we thought, well, that's going to be something very good to do to help in larger numbers than we've been able to just in piecemeal way with the mentorship program. So that was Creative Academy. But when AI came, we could tell immediately that a lot of translators were kind of worried about it, because, just like with Google, they worried to some extent back then about the fact that, that could replace their jobs. We see it very differently. We wanted to make that message very clear that actually, no, you're essential. And if you're coming out of university, we've got two audiences for Creative Academy. One is the graduate who's keen on the creative industry and looking at AI and going, oh my God, where do I even fit? And the other is the experienced linguist who's just not necessarily too sure how best to apply AI to their workflows and get productivity out of it.
I've spoken to a lot of university and kind of graduate programs recently, and they're saying it's getting harder to find people that want to enroll in like degrees that are called translation or have translation or even interpreting in the name. So some of them are actually rebranding on their own, and they have some of their own branding challenges. They, for example, the university I studied at, they just call, I think they're calling it now like multilingual communication instead of translation degree, and hope to attract more talent. Are you seeing something similar, that like on the maybe in the younger, early 20s, mid 20s cohort that they're more reluctant to go into a language career because of AI?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think the university's doing that. Show the way it's going. It will be around content. It will be about marketing and really around communications, because there is still, I mean, there is still a huge relevance, a strong need for that human insight. And then actually, the ones coming out of university now are the right age group to be sort of very aware of market sensibilities within their age group, and they are the target audience for many brands, right? So I think their input is absolutely key. And then the experienced hand is also needs to be able to, adopt these methods as well, because for what they can do, they can accelerate that, and they can be relevant and competitive in a marketplace that's changing, and that's the reality we face. So I do think that a lot of young people coming out of university, and where I'm thinking about is the ones who chose that career 4 years ago, okay, and then everything's happened since. So if they were going into it now, yes, they would want to be looking at the most open-ended language. How can I do this? And they'll be looking at influencing or influencers being, a thing, and they'll be looking at how they can be a technology-led approach to the craft of language. But at this point in time, there is absolutely no replacement of the linguist. It's really how we work. It's changing workflows, workflow design, really.
Let's talk about 2025, maybe even a little bit further out. What's on your roadmap? What are some of the initiatives you're planning for this year and next?
There's been a lot of change in 2024, and I think there's a new focus now on what we can realistically achieve with AI, and I think that the market is less sort of overawed by AI. I think everyone's looking at it practically now, and that's
Yeah.
exciting. I think that the emergence of new agencies that are very focused in their marketing approach is an exciting time. So we will see a lot of growth in that area. The content origination, I think, like I've always said, where any tool being in the hands of the craftsman or craftspeople, is in the best hands. So with Creative Academy, we're looking to provide some assurance and some stepping stones to embarking on a career, and also some guidance. I think the industry's changing at a pace. For us, though, it's very important in the age of AI that we are looking at the risks of shadow AI as well. Because if you are a translation agency and you haven't necessarily taken the bull by the horns here, you may be using translators who are of their own free will using AI to enhance their productivity. Okay, makes sense. Why not? But if that AI is open source and you're putting information into the public domain that you shouldn't be, you've got a risk there. And if the resulting translation, if you haven't really looked at it because you're just banging them out, I'm not saying, translators are going to do this, but some people may be tempted to just get through. It's a possibility. There are huge risks with plagiarism and IP. And if you're a translation agency in the business of recruiting translators, using their work and then handing it over to a brand or an agency, you have to have sign off on that IP. You can't risk not having that. So a lot of the driving of 2024 for us was identifying workflows that absolutely and robustly secure and give us an audit trail on exactly what's being generated. So we know, hand on heart, where we are with what we've done, whether that's content generation or whether that is enhancing or speeding up the translation process using AI. We can provide an audit trail. We know exactly what was used when and how much, what percentage of AI was used, what percentage of translation memory was used. And I think that's very important. So having that moving forward, if you don't have a system or a place like that or a technology workflow scenario like that, you are at risk of providing work that is not yours, or a risk of leaking information inadvertently via your supplier chain, to the public domain. So there's not. I realize that's not an exact answer to your question, but the Creative Academy is a lot to get our teeth into, and a lot of the stuff that we're we're looking at there is around educating those who are embarking on using AI for their language service, how to use it properly.
Very, very valid point generally, because I mean, people are using these tools now with abandon, and they're signing up to all kinds of new solutions that, you know, you have no idea where your, I don't know, image or text is going to end up, right? So we've had these processes in place with neural machine translation where people were, you know, okay, we're aware we're using the free version of name tool, and then AI hit, and then you open up another huge box of potential solutions where you can, you know, put your sensitive content into. So I think, yeah, it's definitely something that's super important to be on top of if you want to, you know, continue in this business and not have any major problems there.
Where every engagement we have with our partnership agencies that we work with and brands, we do have to sign, you know, there's always a wodge of, you know, paper in the framework agreement, right? And we have to sign off saying that it's our own stuff. You know, we own the IP, and they will own the IP when they pay, everything like that. You can't do that if you don't know. And if you don't know, you have to know.
And that's in the creative field much more relevant, right? Because you are creating copy that could be, yeah, that is IP. Yeah, interesting
No,
point.
but even in translation, you know, because you can automate so much, and you know, it's more the leaking side of things as well, because, you know, putting stuff out there, if you don't know what your linguists are doing, or you don't provide the tool set in which they leverage AI, then, you know, you don't know. So if you don't know, you can't sign that bit of paper. You know, it's very important to us. You know, the integrity and the security is really important, as well as, you know, being able to sort of own it, you know, and then give it to the client and say, this is yours and it's going to work.
On that note, it's going to work. Thank you so much for taking the time today, Luke. This was great.
Pleasure, Florian.